The ongoing war in Ukraine has hit close to home this week after revelations a Radio New Zealand journalist edited international news stories to include pro-Russian sentiment. And while it's been big news here, what's been the reaction overseas and how much reputational damage has this been done? Foreign policy and international relations expert Professor Robert Patman joins us now to talk about this. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning, Michael.
Firstly, were you surprised at this at all, and I guess the fact that in this technological era this was able to happen?
So I was surprised because RNZ has a very good reputation in journalistic terms and always comes across as quite, striving to be impartial. But there were complaints from groups within New Zealand going back to October last year about some of the pro-Russian content of some of the coverage that New Zealand was, that RNZ was giving to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I believe complaints were raised in October last year, but those complaints were largely waved away. But indeed, it appears that Reuters were the agency which were responsible for much of the copy that was changed in a pro-Russian direction. They raised the problem initially with RNZ.
Wow. Do you know of the reaction? I read an article from Reuters this morning themselves talking about that there is a review and investigation going on. Do you know any other international reaction, and do you think it would have reached the Kremlin?
I don't think it's made major news. I think there's awareness of what's happened internationally, but many countries are dealing with this problem of disinformation. That is, where authoritarian states seek to take advantage of the diverse and relatively free nature of the media set up in liberal democracies such as New Zealand. Of course, there's no such a reciprocal arrangement because New Zealand and other liberal democracies cannot penetrate the state-run media system of a country like Russia. Russia has jailed most of its independent journalists. So in a sense, we shouldn't be surprised in that sense. I'm sure that the Kremlin is taking an interest in this story. They've already sanctioned a number of individuals in this country, and I think were particularly stung by Jacinda Ardern's former Prime Minister, quite tough denunciation of the Russian invasion. She did it at the General Assembly of the United Nations as being immoral and also based on false premises.
I guess all of this raises the question whether this could have happened more either wittingly or unwittingly, doesn't it?
Yes, this has apparently been going on for some time, certainly since the beginning of the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we don't know the motivations for the individual concerned, whether they're ideological or some other form of motivation. We just don't know. But what's, I suppose, slightly alarming is the fact that there was no double checking of the editing of the Reuters copy. So there was, I believe now, Paul Thompson, the CEO of RNZ, has said that they're putting in a system where there is a double checking of editing of overseas copy.
And there is a review into how it all happened, and also that review panel is going to recommend areas for improvement also. Just lastly on this topic, and I don't want to suggest that this person is this by any means, but it sort of brings up this idea of spies in the country. Is that fair, and should we be concerned about something like that?
I don't think it necessarily brings up the whole question of spies. What I think it does highlight, though, is that information is very important for shaping public debates and public opinion. And how that information is presented is pretty crucial. And one party, Russia, has violated international law, indeed the UN Charter, and attempted to annex the territory of another. And their country carrying that action out obviously wants to put the best possible spin on it. It's very important that while the war is covered as objectively impossible as possible, that one side is not allowed to frame the events in the way that suits their interests internationally.
All right, let's move to America now. And Trump pleaded not guilty on 37 charges of mishandling classified information. Most of his fellow Republican presidential nominees have been relatively quiet, apart from Chris Christie. What can we read into that?
Yes, this is interesting. Many of the other presidential contenders, such as Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, don't particularly like what Mr. Trump has done with those documents, but are reluctant to in any way criticize him too much because they're worried that there's a lot of a strong base of support for Mr. Trump in the Republican Party. Indeed, Mr. Trump's the front runner for the nomination. And they worry that if they take him on, that could offend that base of support and damage their chances of getting the nomination instead of Trump. Chris Christie seems to have taken a slightly different tact, and he's been quite an enthusiastic and full-blooded critic of what Mr. Trump has done. And he said that Mr. Trump keeps blaming everyone else but himself. But he said that, those 14,000 documents didn't airlift themselves into his property in Florida. And what he has done, in Mr. Christie's words, is inexcusable. So this is interesting. Mr. Trump's legal troubles are beginning to change the dynamics of the debate within the Republican Party.
I'm sure more to come on this subject as well. That's politics professor at Otago University, Robert Patman. Thank you so much for your time this morning.